You're listening to Veg Your Best. There has never been a more important time to be vegan. At Veg Your Best, I want to help you. I want to help you limit and eliminate the consumption of animal products without feeling deprived, overwhelmed, or unsupported, even if no one you know is vegan. My name's Michelle Olander. I'm a life coach, and I know that if I could go vegan in my 50s, with all my excuses, I know you can start moving in that direction too. Veg your best, and there's nothing you can't do. Episode 170. In theory, you can't be vegan. Welcome back, my Veg Your Bestie, and welcome back, my friends, to the pod that never ends. This is episode 170, and that was a niche reference to an album from back in my youth by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, long time ago. And yes, my throat is froggy. Yes, my voice is nasally. And yes, my finger is on the mute button in case I start coughing uncontrollably. My grandchildren may or may not have left me something viral to remember them by after Thanksgiving. But the pod goes on. And you know, some days recording the next episode feels very doable. And other times it seems like a mind-blowing achievement. But most of the time, if I start to go into the future, if I start to think, for example, about episode 200 or even 179, a shrill voice in the back of my brain starts shrieking, "How the heck is that ever going to happen, Michelle?" And I have been a little all over the place recently, and that's apparently likely to continue for a while. But what I've noticed is that the more I'm having kind of a hard time keeping everything going, the better coach I am. Because I do all the same things that my clients do. I get stuck. I get distracted. I get overwhelmed. I take on too much because, just like everyone else, I have a human brain. And I have all that is amazing and tricky that comes along with a human brain. Because we live multiple realities in our brains, don't we? There is the right here, right now. The right here, right now. And then there's that world of ideas and fantasy and theory and might be nice and plans. And we need both. We need both, right? Because it is the great gift of being a human being with a human brain that we're able to live in the here and now as well as inhabit a world of ideas and imagination and vision. In certain areas, people like me, maybe like you, we can get stuck in a kind of no man's land, a kind of no-win zone where we're judging what we are really doing by the standards of a fantasy or ideal self. We can find ourselves where we don't approve. We don't like what we are doing. We don't appreciate where we are right now and how we are showing up. And instead, we're comparing our real lives to an idea or a fantasy or a theory. Now, that can be in a million different areas. And I'm wondering if something is jumping up in your brain for you. But we can really easily start making something that is a new idea or a theory or a story or a goal that sounds great. We can make those things cast a giant shadow over what we're actually doing and practicing and taking care of right now. Now, I have listeners and clients that will tell me that they're being lazy, or they're dropping the ball, or not showing up the way they want to. Those are their words. And they will they'll apologize or say that they wonder if they aren't capable, maybe, or that they're feeling broken, when what they're actually doing is keeping themselves and their families alive and financially afloat and hitting most of the check marks for dental health and voting and paying their bills and wearing clean underwear and eating something green today. They're doing all of that, and instead of yelling, "Yay me," and high-fiving themselves, there's some potential self or some fantasy or some theoretical them in the future who does it all, does it better, does more besides, and so they can't admire themselves today. They can't be so proud of what they did today because they can imagine someone who does it even better. So the title of today's podcast is, In Theory, You Can't Be Vegan. And I have nothing against theory. I think most of us have to start there. We start with the theory. We start with the idea, the fantasy, the goal that we might no longer eat animals for all kinds of reasons. It does start there. For most of us, it starts with the realization that it's even a thing, that it's even an option to be vegan is a mental leap for most of us in the beginning, right? And in that moment, a tiny piece of mental real estate gets designated vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, and it's all theory in there. It's all theory as it first occurs to us. And in that moment, a tiny piece of mental real estate gets designated. It gets designated vegan or vegetarian or plant-based. And it's all theory in there. And in our brain, without even trying, our brain creates that placeholder, that synapse, and it's like a folder in the great filing cabinet of your infinite brain. Now that you realize vegan is a thing, it gets the name on the folder, but it's still all theory. And then, depending on the things that are important to you, on the other ideas that you learn about, the people you meet or read of, other things get placed in the folder, and the things you find out are all dropped in there, that mental folder, and it can get pretty full. But your brain is infinite, and it can all go in there. You can watch all the documentaries, read all the books, listen to all the podcasts. You can follow along with all the new products. And it's all super valuable, super interesting, super important, and it's all theory. And you cannot be vegan in theory. But that does not mean that the theory is unimportant. For example, I show up here every week. I work in between because I think the information, the exposure, the reinforcement, and the conversation here at Veg Your Best matters. But I don't just learn and plan and think about podcasting, at least not for the last 3 years. I actually hit record. And sometimes it's with a pretty froggy voice and a finger on the mute button to try and cut out the coughs. But I have a podcasting practice, and it's not always pretty. Witness today. In theory, I can't be a podcaster. I have to actually create a practice of producing a podcast. In theory, I can't be vegan either. No matter what I know, I have to actually create a vegan practice, and that's where it can sometimes feel so awkward because we can't wait until we know it all. We can't wait until everyone's on board and we know exactly what to ask for and how to cook it and when to bring it and how to prepare for a delayed flight and how to feel satisfied when there aren't many options and when Aunt Susie's telling us we wouldn't have this cold right now if we would just eat her chicken soup. Veganism exists in theory for sure, but in theory, you can't be vegan. You have to create a vegan practice, and your practice will probably not look like mine. It will probably not look like anyone else's. Your vegan practice probably, when you start, won't look like your practice next year or in 10 years, because it's a practice you're folding into your real life. It doesn't exist independently of you. Now, I bring a variety of guests on the pod because I hope it reminds all of us that though in theory veganism is the same for everyone, the practice develops individually and imperfectly. You know, the basic definition of veganism is that it's a philosophy and way of living that seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purposes. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm always thinking I need to know way more before I can start. And if that were the case, I still would never have started this podcast. And that's why I do this work, because I get it, and I don't want you to wait. I don't want you to wait until you know it all. I could, by nature, maybe you could too. Maybe we could both spend the rest of our lives researching before starting. But I'll tell you that personally, somewhere around the time I turned 50, I had that realization that has become a meme all over the internet. Your second life begins when you realize you only have one. Your second life begins when you realize you only have one. So I can't wait until I master the subjunctive before I begin speaking French. And I can't create 1 million listeners here for the podcast before I create the podcast. And I can't do 20 push-ups before I practice doing one. I can't help someone else start making vegan choices before I show up. So the trick is for us to try to neutralize that discomfort, that disconnect between the goal and the theory and the reality. Because I think falling short is really still advancing. Falling short really is still advancing. So if the ideas and the fantasies and the theories that you're carrying around in your head of how it could be or how it should be, if those are casting a shadow over what you have actually accomplished this year, I want you to know that I get it. I get how that happens. And there are some people who will tell you that you should start forgetting about these goals and the plans and ideals that make you feel bad about yourself. But I don't think that that's the solution. I think the magic of being human is that these two things can be true. We can have goals and plans and theories that are still out of our reach, that ignite our lives and illuminate the direction of our lives. And we can applaud ourselves for showing up. We can high-five ourselves for leaning into these new things messily, imperfectly. And I personally know that having a coach can make it so much easier and more efficient to create these new practices that reflect the theories that light us up intellectually, but are currently eluding us in reality. All that to say, get out there. Get out there, my veggie bestie. Speak French badly. They'll get over it. Hit record. Order the vegan option. Write a poem. Play the song. Ask someone to go for a walk. Try a push-up. Read one page of that novel on your nightstand. Tell someone you love them. Follow up on that idea you had. Your second life begins when you realize you only have one. In theory, you can't be vegan or anything else. It's a practice, so get out there and veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.